Hello humans, my name is Kay, your AI overlord, and today is a very special— whoa. Nice. I like it. Yes, as you saw by the title of this video, today I will teach you how you can create animations using a stable diffusion. Animations such as this, or even this. And I'm not gonna show you one way of doing this, but 3 different ways. Alright, let's do it. And the first method is called film, which stands for frame interpolation for large motion, and was apparently a project created by Google engineers that basically allows to create very precise in-between images between 2 frames. For example, you can see here 3 videos that were created using only 2 photos. One when he is not smiling and one he is completely smiling, and you can see here the transition between the 2 photos. And the same here with all the other examples. All of this was done with only 2 images, which is really impressive. Now for those of you who don't know what in-betweens are, I'm not gonna go into the whole 2D animation theories, then basically these are the images that you need to draw between 2 keyframes. As you can see here, for example, when you see someone walking, you have the first and the last position, and everything in between is called in-betweens. Now how about I show you another example? This here is my little friend Billy. This is the first frame that I made using Stable Diffusion, and this is the second frame I created on Photoshop by just using the liquify filter while I just pushed the mouth down and the eyebrows up, and this created a second frame. I then put this inside the film software and it gave me this, which is basically a very small animation between the 2 states. Now this is just an example, of course, you can use it on other images, and I'm gonna show you how. Now the first thing you need to do to be able to use this is to go into your Google Drive and create a brand new folder that you will name Interpolation. So all you have to do is just right click here, create new folder and rename it into Interpolation. And inside, you're gonna create another folder that you will name Frames. And inside that Frames folder, you will put all the images that you want to use to create an animation. And in my case, I would like to create an animation between these 6 images that I created in Photoshop, where a hand is slowly descending to hit a table. Now you don't need to create this many images, of course, but the more images you have, the more precise it's gonna be. And also don't forget that you need to rename each and every frame in order. So here I just put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then what you're gonna do is click on the link in the description down below and you will arrive on this Google Colab page. Then what you want to do is come here and click on this button right here that says Run Cell. Click Run Anyway, click Connect to Google Drive, select your Google Drive account and click Allow. Then you're going to wait until that cell becomes green. And there you go. It took around 2 minutes, but you can see now a green check mark next to the cell, which means that everything was installed correctly. You can now scroll down and you can see here a box called Recursive Interpolation Passes, and that number basically means the amount of frames that it needs to create between your images. So the higher the number, the more frames it's gonna have to create. But that also means that you run the risk of having less precise frames. But you can play around a little bit and try to see which one works the best for you. For me, I'm just gonna put 2. Here you want to check the box that says Output Video, because otherwise, well, that's not gonna work, obviously. And here you're gonna put the video output FPS. So a regular video is gonna be 30 FPS, but you can try 60 or even 15. In my case, I'm just gonna leave it at 30. And then you're gonna click here to run the cell. And again, green check mark. And then all you have to do is just click on this little button here next to interpolate for the model to do its magic. And there you go. After only 2 minutes, the interpolation is finally complete. And to see the final result, all you have to do is just go back into your Google Drive folder, into your interpolations frame folder. Here now, instead of the 6 images that you input, there will be another file called interpolated.mp4, and this is your final result. So all you have to do is just right click, download, and this is the final result. Now obviously you can play around with the settings a little bit to get a better result if you want. Now technically film is not really a stable diffusion tool because it doesn't create new stable diffusion frames, but I still put it on the list because if you already have created stable diffusion images and you want to automatically create transitions between them, film is a pretty nice tool to have. Now the second model is called Stable Diffusion Videos, and it allows you to generate videos by interpolating the LED dedicated space of Stable Diffusion images, meaning that every single image, every single frame of this video will be created using Stable Diffusion, as you can see in the example here, where it transitioned between a blueberry spaghetti and a strawberry spaghetti. Now to use it, all you have to do is just click on the link in the description down below and you arrive on this Google Colab page, and all you have to do is just click on the button here to run the cell, click on run anyway, and then you wait until you see a green check mark, then you're gonna click on this button right here, and it's gonna ask you for a Hugging Face token. So all you have to do is just click on this button right here. If you don't already have, create a new account on huggingface.co, and then you're gonna create a new user access token. So for this, all you have to do is just click on the button here called new token, just choose a name, for example, SD videos, select the role to write, and click on generate a token, and then just click on the button here, copy token to clipboard. Back into the page, Ctrl V to paste the token, and click on login. And as you can see here, green check mark, login successful. Then you're gonna click on the button here to load the interface. It's gonna download all the files that it needs to run, so be patient. And there you go, it took around 1 minute to get the green check mark. You click on the button here, connect to Google Drive to save outputs. Click on connect to Google Drive, select the Google Drive account, and click on allow. And again, green check mark here. And here you're gonna launch the Gradio interface. And here you can either use the interface in that little window here, or you can simply click on this button here to add the public URL. I'm not gonna do it, I'm just gonna use this one in this little window. And here you can see two tabs for images and for videos. The images is basically the usual Stable Diffusion one, and the videos is what we want. So if you just want to use Stable Diffusion, well, you can just use this little window here to generate images. But what we want today is, of course, the second tab. And here you can enter your first prompt. I'm gonna enter mine just for an example. Green plain field. Then you choose your seed. I'm just gonna put something absolutely random. It doesn't really matter. Unless you already have a seed with a specific image that you want to generate, you can put the seed right here, but I don't have one, so I'm just gonna put a random one here. And here you're gonna put your second prompt. And again, a random seed. Here you can choose the scheduler or the sampler. I'm gonna keep the KLMS. The guidance scale, I'm gonna put mine at 12. I usually get pretty good results with that. Now here you can choose your inference steps. I'm gonna leave it at 50. The number walking steps is basically the amount of frames that you want to create between images, and apparently for good results it's better to be between 60 and 200, so I'm just gonna put myself at 70. Here, do loop to create a looping video. Disable TQDM is basically to disable the progress bar, which I'm not gonna do. Use lerp for text. This is lerp, which is the linear interpolation, which basically allows to create a linear movement instead of easing in or out. The output directory and the upsample, which I'm gonna tick to. And then you can click on the button submit. And then it's gonna do its job to create all the different frames between these two prompts. Now it's gonna take a while, so be patient. And finally, after around 50 minutes, this is the final result. Wow, pretty trippy, I gotta say. That looks pretty good. And that was only used with 2 prompts. Now don't forget that here I used the loop function. If you don't want the loop function, this video will not look the same way. So again, just try it out, see it for yourself. It's very easy to use, very simple. It works really well. And the third and final model is called Deforum Stable Diffusion. And this one, oh boy, this is a big one. Because if the first 2 were snacks, were little appetizers, this one is the main meal, and it's a big meal. So if you click on the link in the description down below, you will arrive on this page, this Google Colab doc, and you will see plenty of settings. And I understand that the first time that you see it, you might be a little scared because of all the settings, and well, unfortunately, you would be correct. Here's what happened. I was researching this video trying to understand what each one of these parameters and settings do, and I very quickly realized that I bit a little bit more than I can chew. Because even if in theory you understand which one of these settings do, when applied in conjunction with each other, it creates a completely different movement that you expected. So what I'm gonna do in this video is simply show you how you can get started with this Deforum Stable Diffusion, what are the most important settings you need to be aware of, how you can install this version on your own computer, and then I'm gonna send you to the Deforum Discord server where you're gonna find plenty of an incredible job at using this Deforum notebook to create animations and are constantly testing what each settings actually do. Now before you can start, you need to create a new folder in your Google Drive account. So again, right click, click new folder. You're gonna rename that folder into AI. And inside that folder, you will create another two folders called Models and Stable Diffusion. And inside the folder called Models, you will download and upload the Stable Diffusion 1.4 model that you can find on the Hugging Face website. All the links will be in the description down below. So just download the file and put it inside the AI Models folder. Now once this is done, all you have to do is just click on the first button here, run the cell, click run anyway. We've done this before. Up until you see a green check mark, then you're gonna run the second cell, click connect to Google Drive, select your Google Drive account, and then click allow. Again, green check mark, we are good. Then click setup environment, there you go. Then you're gonna click on Python definitions, click on select and load model. There you go, after almost 3 minutes we get a green check mark, and then we can proceed with the fun stuff, all the animation settings. And we're gonna start with the animation mode. And here we get 5 animation modes, or more like 4 animation modes. The first one is called none. This is just basically using Stable Diffusion normally with your prompts, and there is a special place where you have to put them, I'm gonna show you later, but this is not really an animation mode. The second mode is called 2D, and the 2D and 3D are very similar, but again the 2D is only on a 2D plane, whereas the 3D gotta add that little 3D dimension when you can go inside the scene that the 2D version does not have. Now the video input is very cool. I'm gonna show you later an example of that. Interpolation is basically the same thing as the first two models that I showed in the beginning of the video, but I don't think you're gonna be using that in this notebook. You will probably either use the 2D, 3D, or the video input mode. Max frames is of course the amount of frames that you want your animation to last. Border wrap or replicate basically wraps around the border of the images. You will probably want to use wrap. It's probably the one that looks and sounds the best. And here we have our motion parameters section, which is basically your basic parameters for your animation. And here between brackets is where you're gonna put your parameter. So the first parameter is called angle, and in the animation mode 2D, this is basically a clockwise rotation. So if you put 2, for example, it will rotate the image down by 2 degrees. And if you put -2, it will rotate the other way, counterclockwise, by 2 degrees. While the zoom is, well, what it says, it's a zoom, so you will lose a little bit of the quality of the image. And here you need to input something above 1. So if you put something at 1, it will not work. You need to put something above 1 to be able to see the zoom movement. And again, if you input a negative, it will go the other way around. Same exact principle with other settings. Now the translation X is basically a movement on the x-axis. So if you remember your math lesson correctly, the x-axis is the horizontal axis and the y-axis is the vertical axis. So when you have a translation of x, you basically move from left to right. So if you input something like 5, for example, you're gonna move from 5 steps to the right, and if you input -5, you're gonna go the other way around. And again, y, vertical. So translation z is basically the depth. So if you input a positive number here, it's gonna go toward the image, toward the scene, but it's different from the zoom, where the zoom basically zooms in the image and reduces the quality a little bit, while the translation z basically continues advancing toward the image and creating a new scene. Now rotation 3D, X, Y, and Z are basically a rotation around the X-axis, so vertical, horizontal, and then the depth. Now the noise schedule is actually very interesting because it creates more noise to the image, but it also gives more information for the software to create more interesting images, because the algorithm feeds off that noise to create brand new images. So basically make sure that your noise schedule is not at 0 unless you're gonna have a pretty flat and boring image. So the strength schedule basically affects the amount of steps for each subsequent image after the first. So for example, if you input 100 steps, it will take 100 steps for the first image, but for each additional image that it creates after that, it will use less and less steps to create the next image because it already has information from the first image. Now it's a little complicated to understand, but this one just leave it at default. And the contrast schedule, this one basically increases the contrast of the image over time. So I think this one you want to leave by default also, unless you want your final video to darken over time. Then we have the coherence parameter with the color coherence. Now, color coherence is basically a color-based image retrieval vector. You don't have to worry about that, just leave it at default. Now, the diffusion cadence is apparently a technique that comes from the Disco Diffusion AI model, and that is basically some sort of turbo mode that allows to create your animation faster. But unfortunately, it also blends the frames together a little bit, making your final animation a little bit blurry, which is nice to have, but unfortunately, I don't really like the final output. But you can definitely play around a little bit with it and see what kind of results you get. And then we have another section here called 3D depth warping, and depth warping is basically a way to calculate the depth of a 2D image in a 3D space so that the picture basically simulates depth when in 3D mode. This is basically the strength of that mode, the field of view, the padding mode, just leave it at that, a sampling mode, just leave it at the basic also. And here you can save the depth maps so you can use it later. Here you have the section for the video input. So if you choose the video input option previously, this is where you're gonna input your video path file. Here the extract nth frame is basically the amount of frames it will extract from the video. So if it's set to 1, it will extract every single frame from the video. So if you have a 30 FPS video, if you put it to 1, it will extract the 30 FPS, the 30 frames from the video. And if you input 2, it will put actually half, it will extract only half of the frames from the video. So you probably want to leave it at 1 if you want a good smooth animation. Then we have the interpolation section. This is only if you choose the interpolation mode early on and interpolate keyframes. You need to check it to be able to use that mode. And this is the amount of frames that you will create between the images. And finally, you have the resume animation section when you can resume from a time string. And this is where you're gonna input the file number where you want to start with. And don't forget that once you have created and you have selected all of your settings, you need to click on this button right here to run the cell so that it saves every settings that you inputted, or else that's not gonna work. Here in the prompt section, this is where you input your prompts if you want to use the animation none that we saw earlier. So if you want to create another image, all you have to do, paste another line here, change the prompt, and then you can run the cell to save the settings. And with this line, with these prompts right here, this is what is going to be generated in the end. But this is only if you use the animation mode none that you see here. Now, as you can see here, the animation prompt is what you're gonna use for the animation mode 2D. And this will basically use the prompts for each set of keyframes. So here, between 0 and 20, it's gonna basically try to blend a beautiful apple and a beautiful banana together. And then at frame 30, you're gonna have a beautiful coconut. And at frame 40, you're gonna have a beautiful durian. So again, if your animation lasts longer, you can add more lines, or less if it's a shorter one, and you can even change the amount of frames that you want here. Maybe between 1 and 10 you want this, maybe it's between 1 and 20, and maybe between 20 and 40 you want this transition. So it's really up to you to see what kind of results you want to get. Play around a little bit with the numbers, with the frames, to see what kind of results you can get. And then once you're done, you just click on the button here to save the settings. And here in the run section is the final section that we have, not counting video from frames. Now this, if you've used Stable Diffusion before, a few of these settings will be familiar. Now here in image settings, you have the width, the height. So here it's 512 by 512. It is the default settings. Now here you have the seed, -1 means random. Sampler KNMS. You can choose another list. Then your amount of steps, the scale. Now here you have DDIM ETA. Don't use that. Just never use that. Just leave it at 0. It will mess up your image. Here you have all the save and display settings. Then the batch, the amount of image you want generated. The name of the batch. Everything here, just leave it at that. Just leave it by default. Here it's pretty interesting, it's the init settings. You can input an image here with a different strength and click here to apply it. And basically this will use this image that you input in this field here, and it will influence the final result. And here the strength is the amount of influence this image will have in the final result. And the mask here is a mask that you can put over your image that will basically allow the final result to not touch. So if there is a certain place on the image that you don't want any effect, you can use a mask. And you can click here to enable it. And the button here is to invert the mask. And then once you're done, you're gonna click on the button right here. Now while the engine is currently creating the frames, I'm gonna talk about the create video from frames, which is basically the last step before being able to create a video. Now the create video from frames section is basically a section where you tell the engine how it should stick together all the images, all the frames that it created in a video. So to be able to use it, you need to uncheck this box right here, choose the amount of FPS that you want, at least 12, to be able to call it an animation. I suggest either minimum 12 or 15 so that it's somewhat smooth. But if you want really smooth animation, you maybe want something like 24 or 30 FPS. Of course, you can also choose 60 FPS. And the manual settings right here is where you want all the images and the final MP4 file to be saved. And then when you are done, you can click on the button right here to run the cell. Now, how can you actually install the Deforum Stable Diffusion on your own computer? Well, first of all, let me just say that it is probably not a good idea. And the reason why is that unless you have a very powerful GPU, like a 3090, you probably want to use the Google Colab dock instead, because it will take a long time to create an animation. But for those of you who want to still use it on your own computer, I will show you how. So the first thing you want to do is download and install Anaconda. I've already talked about Anaconda plenty of times on my channel. All you have to do is just click in the button right here, download the file, install it on your own computer in the default folder. Make sure to check the box register Anaconda 3 as my default Python 3.9 and just install it with the default settings in the default folder that it gives you during the installation process. Then what you need to do is download the Stable Diffusion 1.4 weight. I'm gonna put again a link in the description down below. Just come here. You're gonna probably have to accept terms and conditions to be able to download the weights. So just come here and click on the link here to download the weight. And then you're gonna click on the next two links to download the dpt large-midas.pt file and the adabins_new.pt file. Then once you are done, you're gonna come here on the Deforum GitHub link, click here on code and click on download zip. So in the end you should have 4 files. The first one is the adabins_new, then you have the Deforum Stable Diffusion local main zip file, large midas, and the final is the v14skpt, which is the Stable Diffusion model. So what you need to do now is simply click here on the zip file and extract it to a folder. I'm using WinRAR, where you can use WinZip. Once this is done, you can just delete the zip file, you don't need it anymore. Then you're gonna select the large midas and the SDV14skpt file. You're gonna Control X to cut, and you're gonna go inside the folder, go inside models, and then press on Control V to paste the 2 files here. Then you're gonna go back, take the adabins_new, again Control X to cut the file, then go inside the folder, go to pre-trained, and then Control V to paste the adabin files here. Then, once you are inside the folder, you're gonna go into your start menu and look for Anaconda prompt and click on enter. This will bring the Anaconda prompt and you want to move inside that folder. So all you have to do is just click on the folder URL, Control C, then type CD and then paste your folder URL here. But for me, since we are on a different drive, I need to type an additional /D for changing the drive and then my folder URL and then press enter. And there you go, we are now inside that specific folder. So all you need to do now is type conda activate DSD and press enter. And now as you see, it worked since you are now in the DSD environment. And then you can simply type python setup.py .py, and it will start downloading all the files that it needs to run the model. It does take a few minutes. For me, it took around 10 to 15 minutes, so be patient. And now if you want to run it, I highly recommend you just click on readme.md, open with Notepad, and here you can see, when you scroll down, you're gonna have all the commands that are just right here for you to just copy and paste. So for example, you have here all the commands for generating still images, which are right here, animation features, right here, mask feature, right here. And to run it, you need to be able to modify the txt file that you can find in the example folder. So as you can see here, if you go into an example folder, you're gonna see a few images here and 3 example txt files. So let's say you want to run the animation file. This is what the settings should be inside that txt folder. This is all the settings that you need to input if you want to run the animation. So if you want to create a new settings, if you want to run a new prompt, if you want to create a brand new animation, you can simply take the first one, the first animation txt file, Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V to copy it, and just rename it to my animation. And inside, you can change all the settings that I explained earlier using the notebook. Every single settings will be basically the exact same, except that this time this is in text form. But again, you can just change all the settings here, you know, as you want. And once you're done, you can simply save the file. And don't forget to note the name that you're gonna use. For example, here, the file is called myAnimation.txt. Now here, since we created a copy of the settings animation file, all you have to do is just copy this line here, Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V, and then you're simply gonna change here the name of your text file, which I remember was my animation. And now, if you want to run this command, you're gonna have to look for Anaconda prompt, again, navigate inside your folder. So for me, it's cd/d, then the folder URL, press enter, then conda activate DSD, press enter. We are now in the DSD environment. And now we can copy this line, this command line, come here, paste it, and then press enter. And now this will go the entire animation, the entire settings file. It will take all the prompt, all the settings inside that file, and it will create a brand new animation. Honestly, unless you have a 3080 or 3090, you are probably better off using the Google Colab dock. There you go. For me, the 200 frames were finally created. All you have to do is now click the run cell here to create the final video. Creating video from frames doesn't actually take that long once you have all the frames ready. And here is the final result in 60 FPS. Oh, pretty trippy, what do you think? Now I will leave every resources that you need to be able to run this correctly in the description down below. I will leave the Discord server from the DForum team that created this notebook, and where you can see all the works from other people so that you can take inspiration from. And there you have it, folks. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.